Okay, so this is the DOF for Thursday, February 20th, 2025. We're in Sanhedrin 65. Okay, so we start off with a new Mishnah. So the Mishnah says, so it starts off, it says the list of those liable to be executed by stoning includes those who practice various types of sorcery. So the Mishnah describes them here. It says a necromancer is a pitom from whose armpit the voice of the dead appears to speak, and a sorcerer is one from whose mouth the dead appears to speak. These, the necromancer and the sorcerer, are executed by stoning, and one who inquires about the future through them is in violation of a prohibition. So, what is it? Gemara says, what is the difference here? That the Mishnah teaches the halachot of both a necromancer and a sorcerer, and what is different in tractate Keratot, that the Mishnah teaches the halach of a necromancer but leaves out the halach of a sorcerer. Rabbi Yochanan says the Mishnah in tractate Keratot, so that's further in the Talmud, towards the end of the Talmud, does not count a sorcerer separately in the list of those liable to receive karet, since both a necromancer and a sorcerer are stated in the Torah in one prohibition. Consequently, one who unwittingly serves as both a necromancer and a sorcerer is not obligated to bring two sin offerings, as would be one who transgressed two prohibitions punishable by karet. So Reish Lakish says a sorcerer is not included in the list in tractate Keratot because his transgression does not involve an action, so it involves only speech, and one does not bring a sin offering for transgressing a prohibition that does not involve an action. So the Gemara asks, and according to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, that a sorcerer is not listed because sorcery is included in the same prohibition as that of necromancy, what is different about a necromancer that the Mishnah uses specifically that example and not the example of a sorcerer? The Gemara answers, the Mishnah chooses to mention the example of a necromancer because the verse introduces the prohibition with it. The case of a sorcerer is mentioned in the verse afterwards, to Deuteronomy 18:11. So the Gemara asks, and what is the reason that Reish Lakish did not say an explanation in accordance with the explanation of Rabbi Yochanan? Rav Papa says Reish Lakish disagrees with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan because the cases of a necromancer and a sorcerer are divided in the verse with regard to the issue of death penalty. That is, one is liable to receive the death penalty for each transgression. So consequently, one would be obligated to bring a separate sin offering for sorcery, were it not for the fact that this transgression does not involve an action. So Rabbi Yochanan could respond that one cannot infer the number of sin offerings one is obligated to bring based on capital punishment. With regard to determining the number of sin offerings where there is a division of a prohibition, that is, when two acts are listed as two separate prohibitions, it is considered a division that leads to a separate sin offering. But where there is a division of a separate death penalty, when the death penalties are listed separately, it is not considered a division in this regard. So the Gemara asks, and what is the reason that Rabbi Yochanan did not say an explanation in accordance with the explanation of Reish Lakish, that a sorcerer is not listed in tractate Keratot because his transgression does not involve an action? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Yochanan could have said to you that the Mishnah of tractate Keratot is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who says that we do not require an action for one to be obligated to bring a sin offering. And Reish Lakish could have responded to that although Rabbi Akiva does not require that one perform a significant action to be obligated to bring a sin offering, nevertheless he does require that one perform at least a minor action. So sorcery, by contrast, involves no action, and therefore even Rabbi Akiva would not deem one obligated to bring a sin offering for it. The Gemara asks, in the case of a blasphemer, that is one who curses God, what action is there? He merely speaks, and nevertheless Rabbi Akiva deems him obligated to bring a sin offering. Clearly, Rabbi Akiva maintains that no action is necessary at all. The Gemara answers, the twisting of his lips while he speaks is considered an action. So the Gemara asks, what action is there in the case of a necromancer? The Gemara answers, the striking of his arms against each other in order to create the sound of a voice is considered an action. The Gemara asks, and is this considered an action even according to the opinion of the rabbis, who require significant action for one to be obligated to bring a sin offering? But isn't it taught in the Baraita, one is liable for idol worship only for a matter that involves an action, that is sacrificing an idolatrous offering, burning incense to an idol, and pouring a libation to an idol, and bowing to an idol, right? And Reish Lakish says, who is the Tana who taught bowing among these examples? It is Rabbi Akiva, who says, we do not require a significant action for one to be liable. Any action is sufficient. And Rabbi Yochanan says, you may even say that the Baraita is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, so the majority, as the bending of one's height according to the opinion of the rabbis is considered a significant action. So like bending down, right? Now consider, if according to Reish Lakish, the bending of one's height is not considered a significant action according to the rabbis, meaning the majority of the scholars, can a less noticeable action such as the striking of the necromancer's arms be considered a significant action? The Gemara answers, Reish Lakish concedes that according to the rabbis, the striking of the necromancer's arms is not considered a significant action. It says, when Reish Lakish says that it is considered an action, the statement is also in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, but according to the rabbis, it is not considered a significant action. So the Gemara challenges, if so, that the rabbis hold that the transgression of a necromancer does not involve an action, then when stating in Tractate Keratot 2a that if one unwittingly transgresses a prohibition for which one is liable to receive karet, if he transgresses it intentionally, he is obligated to bring a sin offering, excluding a blasphemer, as he does not perform an action. The rabbis should have stated excluding a blasphemer and a necromancer, as they do not perform an action. Rather, Ula says, the reason the rabbis do not state excluding a blasphemer and a necromancer is that when the Mishnah there lists the case of a necromancer, it is referring to one who burns incense to a demon in order to raise the dead, which is a significant action. Rava said to Ula, one who burns incense to a demon is an idol worshiper, which is already mentioned in the Mishnah in Keratot. Rather, Rava says the Mishnah there is referring to one who burns incense to the demons not as a form of worship, but as a matter of sorcery in order to gather the demons, that is, to bring them to one place. So Abaye said to Ula, one who burns incense to the demons in order to gather them is considered a charmer, whom the Torah relates with a distinct prohibition, Deuteronomy 18:11, which is not punishable by karet. So Rava responded, yes, such a person is also considered a charmer, but the Torah states that this particular charmer who gathers demons is included in the category of a necromancer, and therefore he is executed by stoning, and karet applies as well. The sages taught with regard to a charmer that the prohibition applies both to a gathering of large animals to one place and to a gathering of small animals to one place, and even to a gathering of snakes and scorpions. Abaye says, therefore, with regard to this person who through sorcery gathers a hornet and a scorpion to harm each other, he is nevertheless prohibited from doing so, even if he intends to prevent them from harming him. The Gemara asks, and as for Rabbi Yochanan, who holds that according to the rabbis one is liable for bowing to an idol, but not for blaspheming, what is different between these cases, leading to the conclusion that the bending of one's height, meaning bowing down, while bowing is considered an action according to the rabbis, but a blasphemer's twisting of his lips to speak is not considered an action. So Rava says the case of a blasphemer is different since his transgression is in the heart as well. The sin of blasphemy does not apply to speech alone, as the blasphemer's intention is central to the transgression. If he spoke without intention, he's not considered a blasphemer. Consequently, one is not obligated to bring a sin offering for such an action, as it is essentially a sin of the heart. Because if we remember, when the witnesses to a blasphemy are interrogated, they're told, they take everybody out of the room and they basically tell them, what did you say? And they say it explicitly what that person said. So that witness would be relaying those words, but he doesn't have the intention in his heart. So here we go. So Ahmed Beit, Rabbi Zera raised an objection to Rava's answer, as it is stated in a Baraita that one who unwittingly commits a transgression punishable by death is obligated to bring a sin offering, excluding conspiring witnesses, who are not obligated to bring a sin offering, as their transgressions do not involve an action. Rabbi Zera asked, and why is a false witness's testimony not considered a transgression that involves an action? The testimony is delivered through speech, which should be considered an action, as this is not a transgression that is committed in the heart. The witnesses are liable for what they said and not for their intention. Rava says conspiring witnesses are different since their transgression is committed through their voice. So the essence of their transgression is not speech itself, but rather making themselves heard by the court. Therefore, since the projection of one's voice does not involve action, the transgression of conspiring witnesses is considered not to be to involving action. So the Gemara asks, and is projecting one's voice not considered an action according to Rabbi Yochanan? But wasn't it stated that Amoraim engaged in a dispute? So those are rabbis from the Talmud, concerning the following case: if one muzzled an animal by projecting his voice, by berating it whenever he tried to eat, as he transgressed the prohibition of, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the corn. Deuteronomy 25, verse 4. And similarly, if one led different species to work together by projecting his voice, without performing any action, he has transgressed the prohibition of, you shall not plow with an ox and a donkey together. Deuteronomy 22:10. So Rabbi Yochanan says he is liable, and Reish Lakish says he is exempt. The Gemara explains the reasoning behind their opinions. Rabbi Yochanan says he is liable, as he maintains that the twisting of one's mouth to speak is considered an action, whereas Reish Lakish says he is exempt, because he holds that the twisting of one's mouth to speak is not considered an action. Evidently, Rabbi Yochanan holds that a transgression one commits by projecting his voice is considered to involve an action. Rather, Rava says there is a different answer to Rabbi Zerah's objection. Conspiring witnesses are different, and since they are rendered liable mainly through sight, that is, the important part of their testimony is what they what they saw, which is not considered an action. The sages taught a necromancer is one who causes the voice of the dead to be heard, speaking from between his joints or from his armpit. A sorcerer, so Yidoni, is one who places a bone of an animal called a yadua in his mouth, and the bone speaks on its behalf, or on its own, The Gemara raises an objection from the verse, and your voice shall be as a ghost out of the ground, Isaiah 29, verse 4. What does the dead person not speak from the grave on his own? The Gemara answers, no, this is not so, as the dead person rises by sorcery and sits between the joints of the necromancer and speaks. The Gemara suggests, come and hear a proof from the statement of the necromancer to King Saul. It says, and the woman said to Saul, I see a godlike being coming out of the earth. 1 Samuel 28:13. What does the verse not mean to say that the dead person spoke on his own? The Gemara refutes this proof. No, this is not so, as the dead person sits between the joints of the necromancer and speaks. The sages taught the category of a necromancer includes both one who raises the dead with his zechor, which is a form of sorcery, and one who inquires about the future from a skull. So, begul golet. What is the difference between this type of necromancer and that type of necromancer? When one raises the dead with his zechor, the dead does not rise in its usual manner, but appears upside down, and it does not rise on Shabbat. By contrast, when one inquires about the future from a skull, the dead rises in its usual manner, and it rises, so ole, even on Shabbat. The Gemara asks, with regard to the wording in the last statement, rises? To where does it rise? Isn't the skull lying before him? Rather say as follows, the dead answers in its usual manner, and it answers v'ona, even on Shabbat. So, with regard to the statement that the dead do not rise on Shabbat, the Gemara relates, the wicked Turner Rufus, the Roman governor of Judea, asked this question of Rabbi Akiva as well. Turner Rufus said to him, and what makes this day, Shabbat, different from other days? Rabbi Akiva said to him, what makes this man, referring to his interlocutor, more distinct than other men? Turner Rufus said to him, I am more distinguished because my master, the emperor, wants it that way. Rabbi Akiva said to him, Shabbat too is unique because my master wants it that way, as he has sanctified that day. Meaning Hashem, right? God. So Turner Rufus said to him, this is what I mean to say to you. Who is to say that now is Shabbat? Perhaps a different day of the week is Shabbat. Rabbi Akiva said to him, the Sabbation River, Sabbatian, I think it's Sabtai. No. Yeah, Sabbation, the Sabbation River, can prove that today is Shabbat, as it is calm only on Shabbat. A necromancer can also prove this, as the dead do not rise on Shabbat. The grave of his father, referring to Turner Rufus' father, can also prove this, as it does not emit smoke on Shabbat, although smoke rises from it all week, as during the week he is being punished in Gehenna. Turner Rufus said to him, you have demeaned my father, you have publicly shamed him, and you have cursed him, by saying that he is being punished in Gehenna. The Gemara asks, isn't one who inquires about the future from a necromancer the same as what is described in the verse, or directs inquiries to the dead, Deuteronomy 18:11? Why are they mentioned separately in the verse? The Gemara answers, one who directs inquiries to the dead employs a different method to contact the dead, as it is taught in a Baraita, or directs inquiries to the dead. This is one who starves himself and goes and sleeps overnight in a graveyard so that a spirit of impurity should settle upon him and he can listen to what the dead are saying. So, and when Rabbi Akiva would arrive at this verse, he would weep and say, if one who starves himself so that a spirit of impurity will settle upon him succeeds in doing so, and a spirit of impurity settles upon him, all the more so one who starves himself so that a spirit of purity will settle upon him. So meaning like if you fast for a good reason instead of an impure reason. Sorry, let me back up. So all the more so one who starves himself so that a spirit of purity will settle upon him should be successful, and a spirit of purity should settle upon him, right? But what can I do, as our iniquities have caused us not to mention the spirit of sanctity and purity? As it is stated, but your iniquities have separated between you and your God, and your sins have hid his face from you, that he will not hear you. Isaiah 59, verse 2. So, he says, look at this, the sorcery of that. I think that's the right word there. If these people fast and starve to receive some sort of evil impurity, power of evil impurity, how much more so that if you do it for a good intention, you fast for a good intention, that a spirit of purity will come upon you and you will be successful. So continuing, so Rava says, if the righteous wish to do so, they can create a world, as it is stated, but your iniquities have separated between you and your God. In other words, there's no distinction between God and a righteous person who has no sins. And just as God created the world, so can the righteous. And we see there's extremely, vast amount of stories about how some of the sages were able to do such odd and miraculous things, even like the prophets, because of their connection to purity and ultimately to God. So it says, indeed, Rava created a man, so meaning a golem, using forces of sanctity. Rava sent his creation before Rabbi Zerah, and Rabbi Zerah would speak to him, but he would not reply. And Rabbi Zerah said to him, you were created by one of the members of the group, one of the sages. Return to your dust. The Gemara relates another fact, and I don't know if you're familiar with the golem. There's some stories about the Maharal of Prague who made a golem, but I don't think that those stories are true. They're a little bit fanciful for the history. But anyway, the golem is supposed to be like a creation, like a man, but it's like the Frankenstein idea, except the difference is they would put the seal of Emet, or truth, on the golem's head. And the idea is, God, whenever he created everything in the first chapter of Bereshit in Genesis, everything, I really need to do a video on this to show all the sources for this. But basically all these statements where God is making a statement and then creating something, there's an acronym of the words, and it spells Emet, truth. And the idea is that if you take away the aleph from Emet, it spells mot, or death. So they could turn the golem on and off by removing the aleph, right? So it either says Emet or it says death, right? Truth or it says death. And the aleph is also representative of God, because the scribal strokes that make up the letter aleph are the same gematria or numerical value as God's name. But anyway, there's a lot that goes into this, and this is a very bizarre story. Anyway, the Gemara relates another fact substantiating the statement that the righteous could create a world if they so desired. Rav Hanina and Rav Ashaya would sit every Shabbat Eve and engage in the study of Sefer Yetzirah. So the book Sefer Yetzirah is extremely old. So it's considered one of the main Kabbalistic texts, and it's associated with, I believe they say that it was Abraham who wrote that text. But Sefer Yetzirah is one of the texts that's going through all the different Kabbalistic sefirot and connections with the body and stuff like that, and just different things. Another one of the early Kabbalistic texts was Sefer HaBahir, and I actually have a complete read through of Sefer HaBahir on the internet right now. I haven't gotten through the commentary, but anyway, that's a really good one right there. So let's see. It says Rav Hanina and Rav Ashaya would sit every Shabbat Eve and engage in study of Sefer Yetzirah, and a third-born calf, Igla, tilta would be created for them, and they would eat it in honor of Shabbat. And this is not the first time that there was like some idea that there was some sort of food created miraculously for the sages. I mean, it happened in the desert. You had so manna, and the quail that would come down. And there's actually a statement. Did we read this? Yeah, we read it a couple days ago, about, if something comes down from heaven, even if it appears to be an unkosher creature, is it kosher or not to eat? And the idea was that there was like some lions, and the hungry lions that were in the path of the sage, and he recited a verse relating to God feeding the lions, and a couple pieces of meat basically came down, and they ate one of them, and he took one of them to the Beit Midrash to inquire if it was kosher or not, because he doesn't know what animal it is, right? And basically what comes from heaven is considered clean. But anyway, so the sages taught, what is the definition of a soothsayer mentioned in the verse? There shall not be among you a soothsayer. Deuteronomy 18:10. Rabbi Shimon says this is one who applies 7 types of zechor to one's eyes in order to perform sorcery. That's male seed. So it's really bizarre stuff. And the rabbis say this is one who deceives the eyes as though he is performing sorcery. Rabbi Akiva says this is one who calculates the fortune of times and hours and says, for example, today is a propitious time for going away on a journey. Tomorrow is a propitious time for purchasing property successfully. Or he says that on the eve of the sabbatical years, the wheat harvest is generally good, uprooting legumes rather than cutting them, and from the above the ground prevents them from going bad. So basically a soothsayer is someone who divines the times. And I was just having a discussion with my wife about this. So like astrology in Judaism, so we don't believe that it's like a false form of information, but we do believe that if you inquire into astrology, then you are bound by it. Right? That is the curse, is that you're bound by it and you can't change it. It will happen. But Jews are above that, because it says that God took Abraham outside to see the stars. He took him outside of the stars, outside of the bounds of the stars. And he was able, basically showing him that your stars are that you're not going to have children, but you're going to have children. You're going to have lots of them. You're going to have many nations coming from you, right? And they're going to be numerous like the sands on the seashore and such like that. So, but if he was... the idea is that if you seek into it, it will be bound to you, and it's something you can't change. That's the curse to it. But if you believe that Hashem is the one that rules the world, you're above that, right? If you're in that system, you're taking on the whole corpus of that covenant. You're above that system. You're beyond that system. So the sages taught the enchanter mentioned in the verse Deuteronomy 18:10 is one who relies on superstitious signs, and one who says if one's bread fell from his mouth, it is a bad sign for him, or if one's staff fell from his hand, it is a bad sign, or if one's son calls him from behind, it is a sign that he should return from his journey, or if a raven calls to him, or if a deer blocks him on the way, or if a snake is to his right, or a fox is to his left. All these are bad signs. So the enchanter is one who relies on these as bad signs and consequently changes his course of action. So we're not supposed to be concerned about that. So there's people like Black Cat walked across, or all kinds of crazy stuff. And it's, I command you to be strong and bold. Do not be afraid or scared, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So you're above that. You're absolutely above that, and you don't have to. If you're concerned about this, somebody else can be concerned about it. Let them worry about it if they feel that that's some kind of sign. But, you're absolutely above that. You're outside of that system. And that's why we're not supposed to inquire after this stuff, is because even if it appears that it has effectiveness, we're outside of that system. And there's so many examples of this. This is the end of the daf, but, that's the gist of it. And it's very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of bizarre stuff that was in all this occultic stuff that is prohibited, and there's different categories for it. But ultimately, yeah, you're outside of that system.